Good evening, everyone. In tonight's show, I'll be talking to Dr. Dolapo Adeboye, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Cardiff University, about children's and young people's mental health, with a focus on racial disparities in diagnosis and treatment. Dr. Adeboye is an expert in developmental psychology, with a particular interest in children's emotional development. Text or call in live and join the show. Become a part of the conversation.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good evening. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in tonight. I want to introduce myself. My name is Femi Owolade. This is going to be my first Teachers Talk show. So I will really appreciate if people can get involved, call in, send text messages. Today I'm going to be joined by a guest, Dr. Dolapo Adeboye, who's an expert in developmental psychology and who has a particular interest in children's emotional development. We're going to be talking about mental health in children and young people, with a focus on racial disparities in the diagnosis and treatment of mental ill health. So I want people to get involved, to call in and to put text messages. If you have any questions for my guest, you're more than welcome to ask. Like I said, I'm going to repeat. We're going to be talking about children's and young people's mental health today, with a focus on the racial disparities in the diagnosis and treatment. Dr. Dolapo Adeboye has just recently finished a PhD in developmental psychology. She's based at the University of Cardiff. She has won so many awards. She's we're very, very lucky to have Dr. Dolapo Adeboye joining us today. She's well researched and well cited. So many articles that she's written in relatively young academic career have done really well. She's won prizes in several conferences, both national and international. So it'd be good to have Dolapo's perspectives on the racial disparities in the diagnosis and treatment of mental ill health. So before we get into the conversation, I would just like to discuss how my weekend was. I got to travel to the Migration Museum to London. Got to travel to London. I'm originally based in Cardiff. So I traveled to London. I visited the Migration Museum, which is amazing. I would recommend the people, just everyone, to visit the Migration Museum. It's such a nice place with a rich, history on migration that dates back to 500 years ago. There seems to be this, common misconception of migration that is very, very dominant in the public discourse. Negative. We hear things like phrases like the hostile environment, and politicians dividing the general public on migration. But visiting the Migration Museum put a lot of things into perspectives, and just highlighted just the complexities of migration, and how what we read in the newspapers on migration is not always accurate. So I would recommend people to go to the Migration Museum. It's located in Lewisham Shopping Center. It's a nice, Lewisham Borough itself. Lewisham has been recognized as the perhaps the most diverse borough in London. There are over 140, I believe, 140 languages spoken in Lewisham. So I would advise people to visit the Migration Museum. So I would say that's we have a guest trying to call in. It's gone now. So somebody was just trying to call in. Can I ask the person to please try to call in again? So Scott Posley has just said in the chat that I was excited when I found out my new school had an emotional support dog, but I was unaware that many Asian heritage students are scared of dogs, which is something I never envisioned as being a barrier to access and support, even with the best meaning intent. Thank you very much, Scott, for putting your message in the live chat. I'm not exactly sure how relevant your experience with heritage students being scared of dogs, how that is relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. But thank you very much for putting that text in the chat. Today we're going to be discussing mental health. I'll be joined by my guest, Dr. Dolapo Adeboye, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Cardiff University. And we will be focusing specifically on the disparities, the racial disparities in the diagnosis and treatment of mental ill health. I will be joined by the guest very soon. My guest is trying to reach me on telephone now. I think she's having some. Okay. Yes. My guest is trying to reach me. Hello.
Hi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. But I think you've signed in on the. Your name appears as mine, which is very strange. I think you've signed up a Podbean account with my name, which is quite bizarre, actually. So I would. Is there a way you can?
Let me recall in.
Can you say that again? Hello, Dr. Dolapo, can you hear me? Hello?
I'll call back in.
Yes. Can you please call back in and with your name reflected on the account? Can you please call back in? Yes, thank you. So Dr. Dolapo has just set up a Podbean account with my name in it, which is actually quite funny. Yes, she's going to call back in with an account that has a name on it, Dr. Dolapo Adeboye. Dr. Dolapo Adeboye is a research associate in the Neurodevelopmental Assessment Unit at Cardiff University. And a research interest, just going to give a very brief just account of her research interest before she joins us again. A research interest is centered on the complexities of the emotional development of children displaying signs of neurodevelopmental problems. She is also interested in statistical techniques grounded in dynamic methods for assessing children's self-regulation and co-regulation that takes place between children and their parents. Wow, I'm looking to learn a lot from Dr. Adeboye today because just reading her biography, it seems like she really is an expert in developmental psychology. Currently, she is leading, Dr. Adeboye is leading a COVID-19 study which assesses the psychosocial effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, focusing on mental health and well-being and the socio-economic impact of the pandemic on vulnerable children and families. So I'm very excited to be joined, to be talking to our guest today, Dr. Adeboye, who seems to be very well versed in psychology and the developmental psychology, to be specific. I'm just waiting for her to call again. She called not too long ago, but it was quite bizarre that she set up a Podbean account with my name. Yeah, yeah, Dr. Adeboye, waiting for her to call back. So we are going to be focusing. She's calling back now. Great. Hello?
Hi, Femi. Hi.
Dr. Adeboye, can you hear me?
Me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, everyone. Femi was helping me earlier, and so into his account.
Sorry, can you are you using headphones? Can you speak a bit closer to the microphone, please?
Okay, is that better?
Yes. So I was just reading your biography to our listeners. Oh, it's loud and clear. I was just reading out your biographies to our listeners, and I was just telling our listeners how impressed I am, with just your level of expertise in developmental, psychology, and it's really, really impressive. And I, would like to say now that I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today. But before we really dive deep into our conversation, I would like you to just give our listeners a very brief background of your research and of yourself. How you came about to studying psychology, and just give a brief background of yourself, please.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is quite new and different, but it is exciting. Forward to it.
Dr. Adeboye, can you speak a little bit louder, please, so our listeners can hear you?
Is it better now?
Yes, I think that's slightly better. Yes.
Okay. So I mean, I've for as long as I've always been interested in psychology, really, and understanding aspects of the mind. So my background really has been psychology through since undergrad, masters. I just recently finished my developmental psychology. But yeah, so I think really it's just the mind and understanding the way it works. Sometimes when it doesn't work as well as it do, and how that impacts all aspects of their lives, but particularly children.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know, your voice is cutting a little bit, unfortunately.
Okay. Can everybody else hear me?
The mic is cutting in and out. I need to
maybe I'll remove the headphones, because the headphones have got like some as well, so I'll remove them.
Yes, please.
Better for everyone.
Yes, please. So yeah, have you removed the headphones?
Yeah, they will remove now.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for that. Can you just give a brief background of your academic trajectory? Starting from undergrad, and what you studied in your undergrad, what university you attended, and then to masters and to PhD, and also give the listeners just a bit about your teaching experience as well, because this is a teaching show. Like you can see, teachers talk radio. So can you tell us,
Yeah.
if you've had experience with teaching students and stuff like that, please?
Well, yeah, I guess undergrad. It feels like so long ago now. So yeah, so I did my undergraduate psychology. This was at Surrey. Then I did my master's in mental health study at King, and now I guess my PhD at university. So you see that really it's been psychology.
Dr. Adeboye,
It's been psychology through.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but there's something wrong with your audio.
Okay, is it still not clear?
Yes. So what are you using? Are you using headphones?
No, headphones out now. It should be clear enough.
Yes. I'm thinking of a solution to this. Do you think it's possible for you to call me?
I can try it on my laptop instead if that might.
Yes. Can you please try on your laptop? And if that doesn't work, you can call my phone. You can call me on WhatsApp, and then I can put you on speakerphone. Then we can have a conversation by that way.
Right. Maybe that might be better. Oh, laptop. Okay, call in on WhatsApp. I'll try.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, please.
All right.
Yes. So for listeners that are just joining, today I'm speaking to Dr. Dolapo Adeboye, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Cardiff University, the Neurodevelopmental Assessment Unit, to be specific. And we're going to be discussing the mental health, in children and young people, with a focus on racial disparities in diagnosis and treatment. So I'm expecting Dr. Dolapo Adeboye to call me back so we can go straight into a topic of discussion. Thank you for joining, everyone. I would like to have people engage in our topic today in the chat. If you have any experience or just any sort of knowledge. Oh yeah, Dr. Adeboye is calling me back. Is calling me on my phone. Hello? Oh, the line is going off now. So I'm expecting Dr. Adeboye to call me on my phone. Hello?
Hello, hi. Is that better now?
Yes. This is better. Yes.
Great.
Yes. I kind of, our listeners just confirm if this is better. I mean, it sounds absolutely clear to me. But can I just get a confirmation from one of our? Fantastic. Thank you. So it's better now. Okay. So we are going to start just over again. Just because our listeners were struggling to hear what you were saying. So we're going to start from the beginning, very beginning, by just having you introduce, yourself and speak a little bit about your academic background, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, sure. So yeah, just like I was saying, sorry if you couldn't hear me before, but so I did my undergraduate degree in psychology, as well as my master's in mental health studies at King's, and at Cardiff University, I have just finished my PhD in developmental psychology. So it's been psychology through and through. All of this seems like so long ago now. Like I've been in education for so long, but it's all been worth it. And, it's given me the opportunity to delve deeper into an area that really interests me and has interested me since I was younger, really, since I kind of began thinking about the mind, the workings of the mind, and the times when the mind doesn't work as well as we want it to, and how that impacts our lives.
Great. So thank you very much for that. And because this is a teachers, platform, radio platform, we are always trying to just seek the teaching angle to all the conversations that we have. And for that reason, can you please give us a little bit of a background on your teaching experience, all the teaching that you may have done in the past, especially during the course of your PhD, please?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the PhD, I guess, students helping you with your PhD research is always invaluable, and they're always happy to help. But in other capacities, I've also kind of supervised their own research projects. So this includes undergraduate students and also postgraduates and master's students too. So I think this was a bit of a learning curve for me, because I wouldn't say that I was necessarily interested in teaching from the beginning, but I think it was a great experience in just showing and kind of nurturing someone else's skills, and especially when it comes to research, and just kind of helping them see something through from the beginning to the end. I think that was kind of a nice experience for me, and I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did, but I actually did quite enjoy it, because I love to see the finished product at the end and how proud of themselves they were. So this supervision was just kind of mainly like meetings, kind of checking and tracking what they're doing. So a lot of, obviously, this would be for students who were psychology based. So this would be kind of like helping them in terms of recruiting participants, helping them kind of come up with their research questions, see if the research questions were kind of applicable to the kind of types of analyses that they wanted to use. So yeah, it kind of ranged quite a bit, and I guess as you can imagine, there was a lot of marking involved too. I wouldn't say that this was the best part of my teaching experience, but it's still part of the experience nonetheless. And so I think it's been quite enjoyable. It's been an eye opener, because I guess as a PhD student, it can also be quite isolating. You're so focused and in your own world, because you've got this research project that you've got to see through to the end, but you've also got some other responsibilities to other students who are maybe also coming up, so undergrads and other postgrads, and you're also supporting them. So the social aspect of it is also pretty good, I would say.
Great, fantastic. I think you've set the scene for a very, very interesting conversation. Thank you very much for that. And I'm very sorry about the tech issues that you've had today. I was just reading your biography, your bio, and I can see that you are currently leading on a COVID-19 study assessing the psychosocial effects of the pandemic, focusing on mental health and well-being and the socio-economic impact of the pandemic on vulnerable children and families. So can you speak a little bit about that particular research on how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected vulnerable children and families, please?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess I would start off by talking a little bit about what the unit that I work at. So, I work in the Neurodevelopment Assessment Unit at Cardiff University, and here we conduct pretty in-depth assessments of young children. So these are like primary school age children, so between the ages of like 4 and 7. So these children have been like identified by their teachers or professionals who were involved in the child's support system at school for having emotional and behavioural difficulties that are kind of impacting their well-being, but also how they are doing at school as well. So we are primarily concerned about the early identification of these kinds of difficulties, and so we work with these schools to see what interventions and support can be put in place for these children. So basically when the pandemic kind of started, we expected that the mental health consequences of school closures and increased financial strain on certain families and greater exposure to family stress would be difficult for all children really in general across the population, but even more so for our high risk children and families, the children and families that we see every day in our service. So these are the children, like I said, at risk of significant emotional and behavioural difficulties, and they may live in families where there are particular concerns about, the consequences of financial adversity and lack of resources. So really, we used, the funding that we received to kind of study and follow these children and these families across the pandemic. So we've spoken to them and assessed them, both parents and children, in different ways across the pandemic. So in terms of finding out about the children's emotional and behavioural difficulties, how the existing emotional and behavioural difficulties have been, if there have been new ones, also in terms of parents' mental health too, and sources of financial strain. So, we've seen kind of a bit about, increases in unemployment and families having to kind of, rely on, government initiatives. So for example, universal credit or emergency loans. So these different types of things that kind of impacted families, but impacted these particular families quite strongly. So that's really the basis of our research at the moment, and really just trying to understand what's the kind of difficulties that these children and families have faced, during the pandemic, and as we kind of, hopefully come out of the pandemic as well. And I think this research that we're doing is particularly important because we don't really know much about these vulnerable children and these families. We know across the population about, general increases in mental health problems, but what about the children who already started off with significant mental health problems and now having to go through such a massive change in their everyday lives, not being at school, not being with their friends, possibly falling behind due to lack of resources and strain on their parents too, and on the family as a whole, and difficult family dynamics as well. Maybe difficult and unhealthy family environments, home environments. So all these different factors, and we just really want to understand how they've worked together, but also how they've worked together across the pandemic. How it's either led to improvements or maybe exacerbations in children's mental health problems.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I mean, there's a lot for me and all the listeners to wrap my head around, because you've just touched on so many things, and I would really like to unpack everything you said now. But before I do that, I would just like to read the text, the messages that have been put in the live chat. Somebody, CJ, asked a question. CJ Vowles asked a question. Does COVID pose unique psychological problems of its own, or does it predominantly aggravate pre-existing conditions? So if you can answer that question very briefly, I would really appreciate that, but only very briefly, because we have so much to actually talk about today.
Yeah, sure.
So yes, please.
Yeah, it's such a good and important question, I think. And the short answer is it's both, really. I think, in the general population, yes, we've seen the advent of new difficulties that weren't necessarily there before. Children, parents, families have been more isolated from each other, from their own family members, from grandparents, from their own support network and support system. Children haven't been able to see their friends. Parents have, along with going through that financial strain, they've also had to, take up the role of a teacher to homeschool their children. So in the general population, absolutely, we're seeing, new difficulties come up. But just like I mentioned, said before about the vulnerable children and families, where there was the particular concerns about the children's mental health already, but also, parents' own mental health too. So really, I would say it's both. It's exacerbated existing difficulties, but also we've seen new difficulties come up as well.
Great, great. Thank you very much for that. For putting that answer in a very brief and concise manner.
Sure.
And I would just like to read another comment that has been made by one of our listeners called Complex, who said so many factors and variables sounds tricky. So I think that is sort of in line, with what you were saying, that there are so many factors to consider. So thank you to Complex, and I would encourage our listeners to engage, in the chat discussion. If you have any question for Dr. Adeboye, Dr. Adeboye, please feel free to ask, this question. We're going to just advance, and switch gears a little bit now, going into, the main focus of this discussion, which is the racial disparities in the diagnosis and treatment of mental ill health conditions. So we're going to go into the racial angle. So I suppose the first question, which is actually more of an observation, that I have, is that there's COVID-19 pandemic itself has spotlighted a lot of the racial inequalities that we have in Britain as a country. We've had research and also newspaper articles published that have touched on how COVID-19 has affected ethnic groups. I don't know if ethnic is the right way to say it, but the so-called BAME groups has affected them more than their white counterparts. So is that a fair statement to make? Given that you're the experts on this, is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, I think what's been a good thing is that you're right, it has spotlighted these things, and that means that we're talking about these things more. We're more aware of we're becoming more aware and spreading awareness about these things that people might not have been aware of or thought about much before, even within these communities and these groups.
Yes.
And so, to be honest, mental health in the Black community is something that is personally but also professionally of interest to me, but particularly more children and young people in Black and minority ethnic communities. But more thinking specifically about how we can promote their mental health and well-being, and I think that's become even more paramount during this pandemic, really. And I think if we just talk a little about mental health in general, and I guess we can think of it as a sense of like psychological well-being, can't we? And I think the term mental health can at times make people a little bit uncomfortable because they're kind of associated with frightening or dangerous behavior, but it's such an important component or aspect of life and health in general. And I think as much as the pandemic has been so hard-hitting, it's also made us think a little bit about the importance of mental health and how it can actually, it impacts every life, not just, children or families who have been diagnosed with different mental health conditions, but in general, mental health is just an important component of our lives, of our daily lives. And I think the pandemic has kind of shed light on that and helped us think about that more. But in terms of racial disparities, what we need to think about is is there enough being done to promote mental health and well-being in Black and ethnic minority communities? And that is really a question not just for society as a whole and when we're thinking about government policies, but even research on the research front as well, an understanding of what poses risk to the mental health and well-being of children in these specific communities. That was
Great.
It's really just become like more of a thing for us to be thinking about now, and I think that is really important.
Yes. Oh, great. Thank you very much for that. You've opened some new kinds of worms. You've addressed a lot of things, but you've opened so many issues that I'm really excited and unpacking. I think from my own perspective, but I'm not an expert on this issue. I follow mental health every now and then in the news and and by talking to friends. And one of my observations is that there's a certain stigma around mental health in the black community, and this stigma leads to a certain sort of reluctance on the part of Black people in seeking help um, outside, their comfort zone, or seeking help, specifically in relation to mental health. And so, do you think that stigma itself, is something that scientists and researchers can input into the work that they do, or do you think there's any sort of like solution, practical solution, actionable solution in debunking that stigma, or in shattering it, to getting rid of it, of that stigma?
Yeah. I think on the research front, there is a lot that that research can do. I mean, number one, in terms of just thinking of helping us understand more about the factors that put these children and young people at risk of developing mental health problems, and what decreases their resilience. So, for example, if we're thinking about socioeconomic disadvantage, economic related stress, communication problems, or barriers in terms of language. These are the things I think research is beginning to. There's a bits and pieces of research that has gone into, or research efforts, I should say, that have gone into helping us understand these things. But I think something that's probably still for us to still understand is what are the barriers to accessing mental health services. I think there's a bit of research research has begun to kind of understand this and to kind of assess this. So, but I think in my personal opinion, I think it's pretty telling that children and young people from Black and minority ethnic communities engage less with these kinds of services. I think it's been reported that while children and young people from these communities are underrepresented in child and adolescent, I should say, mental health services, they actually overrepresented in adult mental health inpatient services. And they're more likely to access mental health services maybe through prison services, so more punitive measures. So I think this is quite an important thing for us to think about, and for researchers to think about when we're talking about what factors or what can be done, what policies can be implemented to kind of address these barriers to access. So I think there's a lot that research can do to inform policy, but also in terms of changing or adapting or making the public and society more aware of the socio-cultural factors that come into play too. So, like I said, the unit that I work in, we're very much focused on, early intervention, and this being key for children and young people in general. But I think in particular for children and young people from Black and ethnic minority groups, this needs to be provided in a way that makes them feel supported. So there needs to be like a recognition of socio-cultural factors in the context of the history, culture, values, and needs of that group. So if I'm talking now in terms of research, I feel like there should be more efforts in terms of finding more evidence-based and culturally appropriate services and interventions that can help these children and young people. So, for example, maybe using a more multi-service approach, so integrating schools, community groups, community organizations, churches and other faith groups together to create kind of like a support network tonight, which I think is also key for building resiliency. So yeah, and I think if all of these efforts working together will help inform the development of services and interventions that are best suited.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. So I'm just going to read out what one of our listeners said. So Salty has just said that I teach in a multicultural school, many Asian heritage students. I think stigma exists there too. So yeah, so I think it's important to just stress that the issue of stigma is not exclusive to black community.
Still quite there, isn't it? Yeah,
yes,
and it's around mental health.
Yes,
being reluctant to seek outside help, or fear of criticism or being ostracized, and also I think also a lack of understanding about mental health and what these services do. What these services are there for, and that they actually are there to support you. So maybe that's not being communicated well enough to different community groups.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And so I was just going to just spotlight that these issues that we've been discussing is not they're not necessarily exclusive to the Black community. The Asian communities to feel a lot of this problems of mental health. There's the stigma surrounding mental health, and coming out and seeking help.
Being open and feeling like you're going to be heard, supported, and understood. And I think these are absolutely key things to supporting someone's mental health journey, really. So I think there is some headway in achieving this, but I think it's still in its infancy, and there's still more to be done. And I think the pandemic has kind of highlighted that all over again, and shown and made us aware that these things need to actually be put in place.
Yes. So let's just switch gears a little bit and go back to the main topic that we're trying to discuss today. So the main issue that we're trying to discuss today, which is the racial disparities in the diagnosis and treatment of mental health. Would you say that there is a racial disparity in the, let's start with the treatment of mental health? Do you think there's a racial disparity in that?
I think there's so many, like I mentioned before, there's so many factors that come into play when we think
I guess was just trying to call in. Yeah, but carry on. Yes.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, there's so many factors that come into play when we think about mental health, but race is, and ethnic background is a very big part of it. And I think when it comes to diagnoses, there's already a lot of debate about the way diagnosis is conducted, and whether we need labels for mental health conditions, and the impact of labels. So there's arguments for and against. But I think when it comes to again thinking about early intervention, but more of a focus on these on Black and minority ethnic groups, we need to think about maybe what behaviors or what behaviors do they look for? Because it can be said that often early signs of mental health problems are kind of maybe missed or misinterpreted as behavioral problems, particularly in boys in general. But boys from let's say Afro-Caribbean backgrounds are even more likely to be identified as having behavioral problems, and they're more likely to be excluded from school as well. So it's pretty clear that early intervention is needed, but it's that understanding of an identification of these difficulties in children early enough, and the right identification in a way that's kind of culturally appropriate. And I think that would necessitate like an understanding of different cultures and what different behaviors and different presentations of behaviors mean to different cultures as well.
Great. Dr. Dolapo Adeboye, this is a really, really good conversation. I'm really enjoying this conversation. But we're going to take a break now, where I would play the news. So can you please stay on the line and join me back in the next 3 to 5 minutes?
Sure, great, no problem.
Great. So yeah, to all the listeners, thank you for tuning in. We're going to play the news now. So I'm sorry about this. Just give me a second. Good.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. Despite A-level results not being released until the 10th of August this year, many parents have already started to contact lawyers in anticipation of launching appeals against teacher assessment grades. Education lawyers quoted in The Guardian this weekend said parents are panicking about teacher bias in awarding grades and whether special educational needs and disabilities will have been properly taken into account. Also quoted was Mary Balsted, Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union, who said her main concern was that teachers will just be left in the lurch by a Secretary of State who has created this situation. Ofqual has stated that schools must appeal grades if asked to by students, and that they have released sufficient guidance to teachers on how to avoid any grading bias. Gavin Williamson has been out this week reminding teachers of their legal duties regarding political impartiality, following an increase in anti-Semitic incidents in schools. The rise comes as students are becoming more politically aware and involved in the ongoing Israel-Palestinian conflict in the Middle East. Williamson stated teachers should act appropriately, particularly in the political views they express, and that pupils should be offered a balanced presentation of opposing views when political issues are raised. That was your daily education news briefing.
Thank you very much. That was the daily news. So welcome back to the Late Late Show Teachers Talk news with me, Femi Owolade. Today I am joined by a special guest, a very special guest, Dr. Dolapo Adeboye, and we are discussing children and young people's mental health with a focus on racial disparities in diagnosis and treatment. So I'm going to get Dr. Adeboye back on the line. So we have a caller. Just missed it again. Salty, can you please call me back? Yes, great. We have a caller by the name of
Hi.
Salty.
Hello,
Hello,
can you hear me?
good evening.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you very much for calling and for tuning in.
No, it's no problem. I find it really interesting, actually. Really positive discussion. And I think my experience is probably a little bit different because the school that I teach in is probably 50% white, 50% Asian heritage students. So I think we don't have a lot of kind of black students, but we do have a lot from Asian heritage. And I think maybe the issues there are slightly different culturally, in the bias that we have sometimes, which I'm really kind of aware of towards Asian students, particularly female Asian, is that they are and well behaved. And I think they are very aware of that impression of themselves. And as a result of that, they often hide any mental health issues. And I know students who are very able, very capable, very hardworking, who will suddenly disappear from school for long periods of time. And that is because they are dealing with things that they feel they can't talk about publicly. I don't know whether that's because of cultural differences. I just find it really interesting to think about how we need to know more about individual cultures.
Hello?
Hi, sorry, can you not hear me?
Yeah, I was just trying to ensure that Dr. Adeboye could listen to everything. So you've raised some really interesting points. But I'm trying to make sure that Dr. Adeboye is still on the line, because you've raised a really, really good point. I think there's the stigma in itself, like I was just telling Dr. Adeboye, it's something that is centered on the Black community. But you can also see traces of that in the Asian community. This is what my observation is, from discussing with Asian students, and so do you feel like this the Asian students you teach and you've come across have this added pressure, in being well behaved?
I do think that exists in the school that I teach in. Obviously, I can't speak for all of the schools, but I do know that the school that I am in currently I only teach A-level students. So we are an 11 to 18 school, but I do only teach A-level. So we see a lot of students under a lot of pressure to become medics, to become pharmacists. And that pressure, those students don't always fit that mold. And I do feel as culturally they are kind of encouraged to go down that path. And that causes them a great deal of anxiety as they feel as though they can't meet the expectations that their families perhaps have of them.
Great. That's a fantastic point. I would like to know if Dr. Adeboye has anything to say to that.
Yeah. No, I think it's first of all, it's commendable to you that you notice these things and you're aware of these things, and I think that's first and foremost a really important aspect of teaching, but also when you are, as having a duty of care to students, even if it's, you mentioned that these are A-level students, so that they're still young people, almost entering adult life, aren't they? So I think it's really great that you're aware of these things, and I think that's the thing. That's the, being aware of the social cultural factors that may come into play in terms of the presentation of certain behaviours. So, for example, teachers sometimes notice less, emotional problems such as anxiety or low mood and depression in children, but more likely, see or observe, or more likely to notice, conducted kinds of behaviours or antisocial behaviours in children. So that's more highlighted to them, but it's almost like they kind of the emotional problems go unnoticed. So I can imagine that be even more the case, when you've got children who culturally may find it inappropriate to kind of express certain types of worries or anxieties or pressures on them externally, and that would be even more unnoticed, and which also comes into play in terms of what interventions and support they would have access to, and that would, I guess, be a barrier.
Yeah, I think it is. I think we have a really good student support system within our school, but I do know that certain sectors of our school also do not access it. They just, they would feel as though it was perhaps almost an insult to their families and to their support network at home, and so many times I've had students speak to me and then say, but I don't want my mum to know, she'd be really disappointed. It's that kind of idea, which I find really sad.
Yeah, and I think that kind of comes back to something I mentioned earlier about the way we think about, or the way certain communities think about mental health, and their understanding of mental health and the services that we have in this country to support children and young people, but also adults' mental health as well. So it comes again that lack of understanding and communication kind of comes into play there, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it does. It's, yeah, and as Sabia's just said, it's a pressure they put on themselves. I absolutely agree with that. You know, sometimes I do feel that if perhaps they did speak to their parents, they would realize that, you know, their parents just wanted them to be happy, but they're so kind of entrenched in this idea of success and achievement. I mean, I feel as though I could do more. And I also feel quite ignorant sometimes. I think I grew up in a very, very white community, and it's only through teaching and moving to a slightly different area that I've become more aware of these cultural differences. And I still think that I should know more and I could do more. And, you know, I try to be aware, but I'm also aware of my limitations.
Great, great, fantastic. I everything you've said, Salty, I find it very, very interesting. I was just very, very recently involved in a research on parent engagement and the importance of parent engagement as a potential intervention that universities can take in improving the academic performances of Black students and Asian students. And one of the the key aspects of this particular research is to empower parents, and to inform them, or parents of this the Black students and an Asian student, and to inform them of just the ways in which they communicate with their children, and the added pressure which they put in their children, and the potential negative implications of this added pressure. So, like you said, Salty, that in Asian communities, there's a lot of pressure on students in becoming doctors, and and always excelling in academia, and that pressure could have a negative impact on the students. On this student. So it's really, really interesting. I mean, I'm not sure if that can have mental health implications on the students, but I find this conversation interesting, and it's great. So Sobia just said, I think it depends. This is what Sobia has just said in the chat. I think it depends. I work in a school where there is no pressure. Majority Asian students. I would like to have Sobia call in, just to just clarify what she means by that. No pressure. Yeah. Salty, do you have something to say? Oh, Sobia is trying to call. I'm going to invite. Yes, I've just accepted Sobia.
Hi, Femi.
I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me, Femi?
Thank you yeah, I can hear you. Thank you very much for calling, Sobia.
A great first show, by the way. Yeah, it's very interesting what you've just said about Asian people, and I do agree with Asian parents. You do get some families where the pressure is really intense, and they do put pressure on their children to become doctors and go into STEM subjects and things like that. However, I do think it depends the kind of context you're in terms of schools. So, for example, I'm working in a school where there's a lack of parental engagement, and those parents are not engaged with their learning at all. And so it's the opposite end. So I think what it is that just like every other school, every other race, it just depends on the context that you're in. And that makes a difference because, for example, I've got some students who are not ambitious at all. They're not engaged with their education, and their parents aren't engaged either. So then it does become difficult, right?
Great. That's
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think context matter a lot. So do you, Sobia, do you think the school that you work in, and just schools in general in the UK, Do you think they're doing enough on the parental engagement interventions that have, specifically geared towards, the ethnic minorities, like Asians and Black communities?
I think it depends on the school. Again, it depends on the senior leadership team of a school. I think leadership is really important in terms of involving parents into this kind of thing, because, for example, I've worked in schools where, they've been really fantastic at engaging with their community, with the parents. They've been writing home in different languages to make sure that they're targeting the right parents, making sure that they've got speakers who can talk to parents on parents' evening in the languages that they speak. And then there are other schools which don't spend any time developing those relationships. They just put it down to, oh, well, actually, they're not engaged, so let's not put any effort in. So I think it very much does come down to leadership in your school and what kind of focus you have towards getting parents coming in. Some schools I've worked in, head teachers have had sessions after school where parents can come in and they can talk to the head teacher. They've had surgeries which are open, and some schools just don't have anything in place for parental engagement. And I think we have to remember, coming from an Asian background myself, sometimes these students are coming in, their parents have no idea about the education system. They don't know anything. And to not be able to communicate on top of that is very, very difficult. So it's a school's priority to make sure that they're communicating with those parents to ensure that they understand what's going on in the school environment.
Great, fantastic. I agree. I agree with what you said, and like you can see in the chat, Salty also agrees, with you entirely. So thank you very much for joining this discussion. Do you have anything to say about just the mental health disparities in the ethnic background or the racial disparities in terms of mental health? Yeah.
I don't know much about it because I haven't done much research on it. But what I would say is that I do think that things are changing. I do think that Asian families and perceptions towards education is changing. So whereas before there was a huge focus on STEM subjects and, highly academic careers, I do feel like the new generation that's coming in have changed and they're wanting to do lots of different careers like journalism, art, media. I think things are changing, and I think maybe the pressure would be less in terms of, academic focus. I think it's kind of changing slowly. With regards to mental health, I can't answer that, I'm afraid, Femi, because I don't know much about it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, great. No, it's fine. Thank you very much for your contribution. It's been a very interesting conversation. I mean, I this is like heaven to me. I'm so encouraged and pleased because this is my very, very first show with Teachers Talk, and just to find so many people just interested and willing to engage, that is very, very encouraging. So I would like to bring back our guest, Dr. Dolapo Adeboye. I would like to know if she has anything to say, any comments that she wants to make. Yes.
Yeah, no, thank you for the comments. It was really interesting to hear the callers and to hear what they had to say. And I absolutely agree that context is important. And I was just going to add that of course there's social cultural differences, but also maybe pressures in terms of how communities or how ethnic communities are considered and perceived in society in general, and that added pressure as well. And this, I think, comes into play with in the Black community, but also in other ethnic groups such as Asian communities too. And so, yes, there's pressure. There could be pressure from home, pressure from parents, but also pressure in terms of how you're perceived in society, in terms of what success looks like, and what being, playing into a stereotype looks like. So there's also, that's a kind of a wider discussion that entails a lot more to unpack there. But I just wanted to say that, I absolutely agree, that context does come into play. And there's so many different factors. And I think I also agree. I'm not sure who mentioned it, but about what schools can do in terms of their engagement with these, with different communities, and helping kind of break down those barriers in terms of communication. So, like I mentioned before, because there's so many different factors involved, this will necessitate, a multi-service approach where you've got schools working with local communities, working with voluntary groups, working with faith groups as well. So then this all needs to be like a whole integration of working together to support mental health and well-being in the communities from all these different aspects of society.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Dolapo Adeboye. We're going to play an advert from one of our sponsors now, and then I'll give Dr. Adeboye an opportunity to just give any closing statements or remarks, or to speak on anything that she perhaps forgot to mention during the conversation. Thank you.
Introducing Amanda Davey. Amanda is one of the first specialist teacher assessors for dyscalculia in the UK and offers dyscalculia tutoring and bespoke training for schools. With 26 years of teaching and tutoring experience in the UK, Amanda offers specialist online tuition focused on building confidence and developing skills. Amanda also offers online and face-to-face training on dyscalculia for educators, informing practitioners as to how to identify children that may have dyscalculia and how to support them in class. Find out more about Amanda and what she can offer you at www.amanda-davey-dyscalculia.co.uk.
Thank you very much to all our listeners that have just tuned in. My name is Femi Owolade, and this is the Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for joining. And this has been a fantastic discussion that I've had with Dr. Dolapo Adeboye on mental health in young peoples and children, with the focus on racial disparities in diagnosis and treatment. Thank you to the listeners who called, Salty, who gave very, very interesting, perspectives on mental health, in the school in which she teaches. And also thank you to Sobia, who gave fantastic perspectives also on Asian students, particularly on Asian students, and the pressure put by the families, parents of Asian students on students to excel. Thank you very much. I will now give Dr. Dolapo Adeboye an opportunity to just say anything that she wants to add, and to add anything to what perhaps something that she has not stated during the discussion and that she wants to add. So, Dr. Adeboye.
Yes, I think everything it's been such an insightful conversation, and I've really enjoyed speaking to you and just really hearing and seeing people engage in topics about mental health, and just it's really good to see that people are talking more about it and becoming more aware, and it's becoming more integrated in our everyday lives now. So it's really, really encouraging to see that. So but thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dolapo Adeboye. Do you have any platform in which the listeners can reach you on? Social media platforms, any website in which the listeners can reach you on if they want to know more about your work and about what you discussed today?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Dolapo_Adeboye. So that's Dolapo DOLAPO ADEGBOYE. You can also find out a bit more about the unit that I work at as well, the Neurodevelopment Assessment Unit at Cardiff University. We are based in Cardiff University, so you'll find us a bit more information about us on the university website. And yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, been nice. Been a nice discussion, conversation with you, and I hope to catch up with you soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. So once again, I want to say, special thank you to our listeners, and especially the ones that have tuned in, the ones that have called today, the ones that have left messages in the chat box. Thank you very much. I actually have a tiny confession to make. So I've been very, quite nervous, to say the least. I've been really nervous because this is my first, Teachers Talk radio show. But the listeners made it very, very easy, for lack of a better term. They made it very easy. All my nerves, have been calmed, which is a great thing. And I really did enjoy this. I hope everyone enjoyed this as well. All the listeners, I hope this was, something in which, you learned a few things about. I certainly learned a lot of things, on mental health. So Complex just said, good job, dude. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Your words are certainly very encouraging. Thank you very much. I hope everyone has learned something about mental health. I've learned a lot, on the racial disparities in the diagnosis and the treatment of mental health. Salty also said, great job, important discussion. Thank you very much. Your words are so encouraging. I mean, I can't really express how grateful I am for these your content encouraging. So Shine, I just came just now. Okay, I'm really sorry about that, Shine. You've missed some very interesting discussions on mental health, but you are going to be able to listen to this again, because this is going to be uploaded on Twitter and on the Podbean Live, and also on our website, Teachers Talk Radio. So you can listen, you can play back and listen to this conversation on all these platforms. We spoke about mental health today. My guest was Dr. Dolapo Adeboye, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Cardiff University. Today we spoke about children's and young people's mental health, with a focus on racial disparities in the diagnosis and treatment of mental ill health conditions. That conversation, led into so many other discussions and conversations. We had people call in. We had Salty and Sobia, call in, who touched on various other topics, including parent engagement and the added pressure on the academic performances of students from Asian background. So you are more than welcome to play back, to listen to this discussion, which is going to be uploaded on Twitter, on our website as well, Teachers Talk Radio.com, and on, of course, Podbean, and I believe on YouTube as well. Conversation is going to be uploaded on YouTube. You're more than welcome to join in my next Teachers Talk show, radio show, next week on Monday from 10 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. So yeah, that's it. Shine just asked when it will be next one. So my next show is going to be next week on Monday from 10 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. And I haven't really thought of the topic, but I can promise you, I mean, I can assure you that it's going to be an interesting topic. Like, we had today, we had a very fascinating topic today from our guest, Dr. Dolapo Adeboye, who was speaking on children's and young people's mental health with a focus on racial disparity in diagnosis and treatment of mental ill health. My first show is on Sunday evening. Yes, I'm looking forward to your first show, Salty. Thank you. So I'm going to read some of the comments that have been put in the live discussion, the chat section, and I'm going to bring this conversation to a close. So Complex said, "Don't judge me, but I can't." Mental health. Don't judge me, but I can't stop hearing mental health. Going to have to watch Christmas films now. Sorry, I guess that's my accent. I'm a Nigerian. So I speak English with a Nigerian accent. But I'm not going to take offense to what you said. It's all love. Yes. Unfortunately, I don't speak English with a British accent. I speak English with a Nigerian accent. So that's probably why mental health. So you could hear mental health. Yes. Thank you very much, Complex. Yes, you're going to have to watch a Christmas film. Great. I have some Christmas films that I can recommend to you. I think Home Alone is a classic Christmas film that would always, have a special place, in my life, So I would recommend that you watch Home Alone, part 1, part 2. I believe there's a part 3 of that as well. Yes, great. Yeah, Chris. So everyone is saying Elf now. Your English is better than my Nigerian dude. Okay. Yes. Elf. Reading more comments. I was going with Elf. Yes. Always Elf. It's too old. I mean movie Elf. Great. Yeah. So thank you very much. Once again for tuning in to Teachers Talk. I really enjoy this. I learned a lot from Dr. Dolapo Adeboye. And I hope you learned a lot too. I'm going to close the discussion now. Thank you once again for joining. And I will see you next week, Monday, from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Thank you very much. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.